Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
Very good.
Nice to see so many friendly faces. I'm going to talk this evening about Sunderland's superb sailing ships. But that isn't a Sunderland ship. It's a Dutch ship. Because the period I'm going to talk about was the period of the tea trade. Now, our competitors in the tea trade were the Dutch, and they pushed us and pushed us and pushed us until eventually we found an American design for a ship known as a clipper ship. And the clipper ship was the greyhound of the oceans. So in truth, I'm going to talk about Sunderland's clipper ships. But I wanted to start by introducing the Dutch, who forced us to compete and to get better and better times on the journeys from China and India to Europe. Now that is a clipper ship. That's the one that's raised all of the problems in Sunderland, that's been talked about by everybody over a great period of time. That is the city of Adelaide. And you can see her there, she's like a World War II destroyer cleaving through the ocean, isn't she? And she brought the tea trade to Europe and replaced the old-fashioned bluff bulk carriers, really. They were bulk carriers, and they could, some of the journeys from China could last a year. In fact, there was one British ambassador to China, took exactly a year on leaving England to get to his post in China. So that gives you an idea of the time scales with the old-fashioned ships. But the clipper ships could clip a lot of time off. And the word clipper is derived from the fact that if I say to you, it's moving at a fair clip, you'll understand what I mean. So the word clipper is a derivation of the word clip, which means to travel fast. Now, the ships I'm going to talk about made one of the most hazardous journeys that you could possibly experience in the days of sail. I'm going to talk about the clipper runs from the Pool of London down to Plymouth to draw stores, and from there to Adelaide in South Australia. And if you look at that map there, you don't realise, but the journey is actually about 16,500 miles. The clipper ships travelled down the east side of the Atlantic and then crossed over to the west side, negotiating the trade winds to America on the way to catch the currents that took the ships down into the south, into the southern oceans. Now, there's a name there, Tristan da Cunha. Now, how many people have heard of Tristan da Cunha? Yes, a few people have heard. I first heard the name Tristan da Cunha in either 1941 or 1942 on the docks in Sunderland, where I was brought up with my grandparents. For my grandfather was the port diver here and lived on the docks. And at that time, I became friendly with an old man. And he was actually a sawyer who sharpened saws for Barham Shipyard. So if there was a saw in the shipyard, Dan Sinclair was given the job of keeping it in trim and keeping it sharp so that the men could do that job accurately. And I became friendly with old Dan. And believe it or not, he'd actually gone to sea as a young man, after serving his time as a shipwright, gone to sea as a ship's carpenter, and he sailed the oceans in these ships, in these very oceans. And I had a time of my life with Dan. I travelled the world with him. He told me about the great whales in the southern oceans, the flying fish in the Pacific, the great stone heads on Easter Island, and all sorts of things. And that was my first experience of Tristan da Cunha. Now, I've eventually get to the ship I wanted to be at. This is the brilliant Torrens. She was owned by Captain Robert Angel, but sailed under the Elders Line. They had organised all the cargoes and such like. And on her second voyage, I think it was, she set a record of 64 days, which no other sailing ship ever got near. And over a 15-year period under Captain Angel, she had an average time of 74 days over the 15-year period for all our journeys to the Antipodes. And not another sailing ship got anywhere near that average. They didn't get within 10 days of it. So that's the brilliant Torrens, built at James Laing's in 1875. And Captain Angel had a massive input into the design of it. And he came here in the spring of the year 1875, and he supervised the building of the whole ship and sailed her out of Sunderland in the October, and she never returned. Now, she only took first and second class passengers. She wasn't aimed at the other trades. She only wanted first and second class passengers. And she had people like John Galsworthy, the author of the Forsyth Saga. I thought somebody would have said so. So John Galsworthy was on her, and more important still, the great author was on her. Can anybody tell me who he was?
Conrad.
Sorry? Can't hear you.
Conrad.
Conrad. Joseph Conrad sailed on her. Joseph Conrad sailed on that. He made 2 journeys on her as second mate. And he wrote a lot about her and swore down to her sea qualities, etc. But she had a surgeon on board for her passengers. She even had a good cow. So if you were going down the middle of the Atlantic and you fancied a glass of milk, you could get one. She had chickens, she had sheep, she had pigs, all on there, because you couldn't refrigerate meat. There was no refrigeration. So it was all kept on the hoof and fed and slaughtered on the way down. And that's her in the doldrums. She's becalmed, because to get down into the South Atlantic, you had to cross the trade winds. And sometimes when you crossed the trade winds, you lost wind altogether. And the trade winds were the winds that carried Columbus from Europe to America. So they went across the Atlantic, not in a straight line, in a great curve. You couldn't just sail straight across the Atlantic. You had to find the winds and follow the winds to get where you wanted. And that's why Christopher Columbus ended up in the West Indies. He thought he was going to India. But he just followed the trade winds. Now, believe it or not, that's actually on the deck of the Torrens. And that's one of our journeys to the Antipodes. And she's sitting there in the middle of the ocean, and they're playing cards on the deck by the look of it. But if you look above them, you can see an awning. So they're in the tropics. But like all Englishmen of that time, they've got their coats on and their caps on. It's like my father went before the war when we used to go to the beach. He used to go with his posh suit on. And you see the difference in attitude and times by looking at pictures like this. But when you look behind the man and you can see that Coleman's open, which let the air down inside the ship. And if you look along the back, there's sails furled and reefed along the back. You can see all the bunt lines and such like there, and you can see the rack lines and the rigging going up into the masts and such like. You get a good close-up view. And some of them are sitting reading, and some of them are probably playing cards or dominoes or something. Thanks, Mick. Now, there used to be a great tradition called crossing the line. And if you were a novice and you'd never crossed the line before, you had to go through an horrendous initiation ceremony. And if you look there, this is just such a ceremony going to be performed. If you look, the man with the big beard, that's Neptune. And he's got his trident, so he will give you a nudge. And next to him is supposed to be Aphrodite, right? And they supervise the whole thing. And the man on the left, on the right of Neptune, has the shaving gear. And if you look down on the floor, there's a big pail there. And what they actually bears, I don't know the full story, and there's a lot of variations on it. But what they did was they covered you with pig's fat and flour. And then they shaved you, right? And this was your initiation in crossing the line. And once you'd crossed it, you perpetrated the same thing on everybody else that hadn't. But that's what they're going to do now. Now there's my ship under full sail. The wind behind her, when she got down into the Southern Ocean, she always had a following wind. And that's what pushed them along at 300 and 350 miles a day. Fantastic distances with no petrol, no expenditure for anything, just pure wind. And look at the way she's cleaving through there, again like a Second World War destroyer, isn't she? Beautiful. And that was the skill, and how do I put it? The English craftsmanship, the Sunderland craftsmanship. It's there to be marvelled at, really, because them ships took the biggest battering that any ship ever had to stand on the oceans, on the world's oceans.
Subscribe to our channel and we'll let you know when there's a new video to watch. The subscribe button is below the video next to the like, share and comment icons. To watch another video, just click on one of the pictures above the arrows now.